Hey everyone, we're going to be talking about n8n. A few weeks ago, n8n went pretty viral. There was a tweet about how someone did a consulting gig with a law firm and they used n8n to stitch together a bunch of AI tools and they made $35,000 in the contract. And
Not bad.
n8n, yeah.
Not bad for a few days of work, and something I expect to see more and more of as we start to automate a lot more of the white collar professions.
So we're going to walk through the landing page, walk through a simple workflow, share our opinion on where n8n stands in the landscape, and share our just opinion of how we think it'll evolve.
Sounds great. Let's do it.
All right, let's just jump into the landing page itself. A lot of these platforms I see, they love using the lightning bolt. I think it implies action. They do have over 120,000 stars on GitHub. It puts them, I believe, they mention in the top 50, which is really cool. The other thing I really like is they just jump right into what the product looks like. So they'll show you the workflow canvas and 3 or 4 of the core use cases. So IT ops, SecOps, DevOps, and sales. They do highlight that within the workflow you can use AI agents. AI agents here is the model, the memory, and the tool himself. It's clear that they want to highlight that. Jumping down, we just see some good old social proof, what are companies that are using them. They're G2 stars and community members. They're also pretty proud of integrations. And when it comes to these workflow tools, it's very important what other tools you can hook into, what actions you can take, what data you can read.
Though I think of that more as table stakes at this point. Like, look at how many Zapier has, right?
Yeah.
Probably add another 0 or 2 on there and you get Zapier at that point. But it is very important to have the right ones available for your agents to take control of.
They do have an entire section on their landing page for AI. n8n did start more along of what Retool was like, creating a workflow builder, and now it's introducing AI, both from the configuration and creation of the workflows, but also individual steps.
Yeah, the part I'm most interested in, and we were poking around on already, is where does it differ from just a standard workflow builder versus an agentic move, which, heavily debatable about how you define that, but I think that it's really important that the agent can actually make choices along the way, do certain things that are not just predefined by a human.
Yeah, and the mental model I typically use is sort of 3 pieces here. One is simple workflow end-to-end. Second is what I kind of think n8n fits into is you have your workflow, but in parts of the workflow you have like agentic capabilities. And then last you have true agentic platforms. So think LangSmith, LangGraph. And last week we talked about Retool agents, whereas there is no structured step-by-step. You actually just put the entirety of the instructions in the prompt itself and then connect to the tools.
Yeah, mostly. I mean, some people still do a bit of Python at here and there, which is kind of what these components can be represented by too, depending on what you're doing. But yes.
Yeah, and I do think one of the benefits of going full agentic, non-deterministic, and starting with the prompt is you're not guardrailed by the inputs being so structured. Even if you're just chatting, it'll know, okay, this is a little out of the bounds of just what the workflow can do. So it actually can just digest that and decide exactly what tools to call at any step. Versus a product like this, whatever's piped into the AI agent step is fully structured. It has to follow those structured guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, anything else you want to highlight on the landing page?
No, you're better at landing pages than I am. So
I think one thing I'll just highlight is it's always nice to see case studies on a landing page. Typically, if I'm a buyer, I want to see a buyer that looks like me, operates like me. I just want to see those case studies. Overall, no, I would say this is a pretty structured, pretty good landing page. So I'm a fan of it. So with that, let's actually jump right into what the platform looks like. We walked through the setup process already, kicking off your first workflow. Do it from scratch. Again, you can see that they're sort of pushing or highlighting agents. The second example here is a simple agent example, or you can work off of the many templates that they have. I actually pulled a template, one of their more popular templates, which is just running a cron job, pulling information from a database and adding a row in Google Sheets. So you can imagine the types of workflows you do here could be manipulating data, could be sort of manually triggered from a workflow. Before I dive into that, let's actually look at what triggers they provide here. So in a blank workflow, you can see all the triggers that n8n provides. Sort of the classic, you can trigger manually. You have your classic cron jobs, invoke via webhook call. App event is really valuable, especially if you're, for example, I think a classic one you'll want to do is for Jira, you can, on the creation of an issue, so this is actually, will be listening to those events and you can use those as triggers. A few that I found pretty interesting. So one, You can create custom forms. We'll actually walk through an example. They have the chat experience. So if you're using an agentic flow, you can make the input a chat. They do have an example around running evals, which is interesting. You can actually use the rows of an eval data set as a trigger here. What I did find a little surprising is it currently only looks like it's Google Sheets, which is the only data set provider they have. Makes sense to start, but I imagine they'll probably evolve this over time. I wonder if they would partner with other like eval platforms to digest information there. We'll see.
Tell them to reach out to us. I do think that if you're going to actually make production agents that are running in the background, you need to be able to easily eval them. There's a variety of ways we can do that, since you can call out to a webhook and be triggered by a webhook here. That would be a way to get the data out of the system to do your eval somewhere else. But it makes a lot of sense if they want to do a unified platform play here, that they'll start to add in evals, experiments, and all that kind of fun stuff. The other one that, if you bring back up the triggers that we'll talk about a little later, I like the webhook trigger myself. I think this is a great way to make sure that I can still write up some code myself, maybe have it run somewhere else, and then call into the core parts that are working in this particular workflow here.
Cool, and then I'll hop over to CoScreen, where we can walk through maybe even a webhook example right now.
Yeah, so one of the ones that I was playing with is super simple. I had Claude write me up a tiny webhook CLI that basically just asks for what is the webhook that we want to hit and lets me talk to it. Let me make sure that everything is running. So we're going to say Python webhook CLI. They give you a test webhook that you can use here. This is not the production ready one, but it will still let you do it. And I have it hooked up just to my calendar. So I can say what's on my calendar next month. I was thinking a lot about this because we're building out a couple different tools and ways for agents that are getting work done to use email and do other things like that. And rather than going and trying to figure out the API for the calendar, I'm instead just using their backend and their existing integrations to be able to hit this calendar. Super simple. It took me, between Claude writing the script real fast and me just using their off-the-shelf integrations, we're actually able to get back this information in the next, in like a couple minutes of work, right? So it's pretty nice, and you can imagine then piping this through to whatever agent you might have running somewhere else or whatever product you might have that's integrated and calling out to this.
Cool. That's awesome. Maybe I'll walk through an example too here. So this is actually this is one from their template. This is a roast my landing page example. What's nice about n8n is at every step, you can just hop in and then execute an individual step. So here you can just see this is the form itself. It just takes the landing page URL. I'm actually going to put in mine, and that's populated, and you can actually pin just that information. So it makes actually piping information, managing this workflow really easy. I'm a fan of that UX, so I can now invoke that scrape website action. It'll kind of walk through that. So at a high level, what this workflow does is you type in a URL in the form, it'll scrape the website. There's an AI agent here. This is a simple one. It's only just going to invoke the model. It doesn't really have memory and tool. But for example, in the memory, you can have the actual chat memory. It could be DB memory. The tool could be effectively anything. Let's take a look at some of theirs. You can call other workflow tools. You can use JavaScript or Python, make HTTP requests, use MCP tools, or if you have a vector store, other products that you can pull into as part of the tool. So it can effectively make tool calls in this AI agent step.
Can you bring up the AI agent UX? Because I want to talk about that.
Sure.
I think this is going to be one of the more important parts of a system like this. I'm not convinced. I haven't used this one too much, so just a little bit today and yesterday. I don't like this UX quite yet. I think it feels a little cramped right now because I do think a lot of the logic should be going. I like this part of the UX. I like the workflow.
Walk through the first one just so we have some input data.
Yeah. I like the workflow, and I kind of like this graph-based. Feels like I'm coding something up in Unreal Engine again, trying something out real quick. But when it comes to the actual agent, I almost feel like this needs to be its own kind of agent development IDE. There's something missing here that lets me be able to see I'm going to give my agent tons of instructions and a lot of context. No one's really solved this well, I think, yet. But this one still feels like it's not quite there for moving fully into this agent world rather than pure workflow world.
Okay, so I'm going to walk through this example here. So this one's pretty simple. It just asks the model, in this case it's just 4.0, to basically roast a landing page. So let's go ahead and execute that entire workflow end to end. So it pinned that information, so it's ready to go through the agent, and then it's going to roast that landing page and then send me an email. So we'll let that go for a bit. And as it's doing that, every step you can always just see the input and output. And in that building flow, one piece that I really do like is you can just drag and drop things instead of using variables. So it's an easy builder of like piping information back and forth. So it went ahead and sent the email. It does look like it has roasted my website, which is harsh but honest and true feedback from the AI.
We got to update the prompt to stop doing the M dashes so that we can hope that we think of it as a human doing it instead.
Cool. So I'll pause there. So we walk through the landing page. We walk through a couple examples of, okay, what does it look like to get started? 2 is an end-to-end workflow. Again, these are somewhat simple. We also have a workflow product at Datadog, and it can get very, very complex. There's looping, there's if conditions, there's multiple trigger types. It can get very, very complicated, and we've seen n8n examples get that complicated. You want to talk about the landscape, or what you think of the product?
Generally, I am going to keep using it, actually. I want to try it out with a few different things.
Yeah.
For me, it's really important back to kind of like why I looked at the webhook first. I'm developing a variety, I'm developing on the side as well, a variety of AI applications. A lot of these are simple, just making direct calls to LLMs. But as we start to become, take over more and more tasks, we do want a little bit of that workflow structure. We do want to start calling out to agents. I'm trying out a bunch of different products here. This is one I'll keep trying because I like the fact that it comes with a lot of these integrations, like we said. And unlike some of the more standard workflow tools, it does seem to like it's heading in the direction of simple agents that you can hook in. I think the thing that is still going to be a question to me is how much do I just keep living in Python code versus how much do I offload to something that's more of this visual editor, or is this like the no-code world where there's a chunk of things that you do in the no-code space to just try things out, but as you start to productionize, you come back to just writing a lot of that yourself.
Yeah, and I think n8n does a good job of letting you sort of interop and put those code snippets through the flow pretty well.
Yeah, I do think they're priced well, too. I know we didn't look directly at the pricing, but I think one of the things that as we start to look at tools like this that might need to scale in production, beyond just, I believe they're open source, beyond just being able to host it yourself, their pricing's not bad. It's relatively cheap. You should be able to scale up. I think of it kind of like Lambda. Like Lambda's still going to be in that rough finger to the wind price range, probably a little cheaper, but because there's a loss leader too. But I think this is doable for production system. I don't feel like it's only priced for being able to build demos. If I want to have a chunk of a small part of my agent backend running on here, I don't feel like I need to pull it out right away until I'm getting to a scale where I want to start optimizing more.
Cool. Yeah, a couple thoughts I have. One is they do have an open source offering, so if you want to self-host it, and if you get to a scale or you get a little annoyed of self-hosting, you can always go and run this through their managed service. Second is, around use cases, this is clearly designed for a developer to implement and use that no-code platform. Obviously, some employees can design this, invoke it themselves, but it does seem like, similar to Retool, they're going for many use cases, like being the engine for several use cases. So I think I'm curious what their go-to-market motion is, because like even just going through the landing pages, IT ops, SecOps, DevOps, and sales is a lot, captures a lot. I'm very curious. I'd love a breakdown. I'm guessing they're putting IT ops in the beginning because that's their bread and butter. But I'd be very interested to hear how they do go-to-market, how do they do sales, if that is something they do. The second thing is, I think it's interesting and important to understand where a business or product starts. This did start as a no-code solution. It has a canvas and workflow builder. We recently tried Retool Agents, which also started there, but their agents product, it does have like a purely non-deterministic agent mode where it's like all instructions. It's the instructions, the tools, and the memory. So that is pretty different from just putting an agent directly inside of a workflow. And I think that's going to determine how these items and these products evolve over time.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that if you're purely non-technical, you're probably moving more towards the Zapier kind of solutions and other similar products. This one feels somewhere in between, that kind of more like V0 or something in the web development space, where some coding, but also some nice pre-built templates and components and integrations. You're not completely a novice, but you're also probably not someone who already has a figured out your tool set and you're writing everything in code all the time if you're using this. My wish list here is probably just keep making it easy to really debug these kind of agent interactions, like keep figuring out the right way to build out that IDE for debugging, because that's the biggest part when you start to talk about a complicated agent, and figure out how to make eval work well for a system like this. Because the problem with agents today is not that you can't build a simple end-to-end workflow, it's that you can't make it work well repeatedly over time for complex tail use cases.
Yeah, and I actually do think the more we transition to agents that are just instruction following and not workflow builders, the more they'll capture those edge cases.
Right.
I actually just talked to a company who's building AI agents as a service, and what they found was they tried to start structured, and one of their key use cases was very similar to this IT ops one, where you give access to a product, and in that experience, an example was, hey, give these X people access, and it actually understood that, and instead of just doing it for one user, it did it for every user. So I do think there are trade-offs here for determinism and non-determinism, but I do think moving towards a fully non-deterministic experience where it just digests everything and knows what tools to call, it probably captures more use cases.
Precisely. And really, if you're building towards the future, you should assume these models are going to keep getting better. And that means that you can give more and more tools to the agents without having to give them exact workflows, maybe just as trajectories or just as examples, rather than saying you have to go and do these 5 steps, these 10 steps. Lastly, we might want to talk about, do they have enough GitHub stars? That's the right question.
They do have a lot of GitHub stars, but we did notice that they do put it inside of their UX, which is an interesting decision. It does highlight that whatever you put in your UX is what you care about.
You can close it off, though, so that's something.
You can, so let's do that.
You can say, stop telling me that.
The fact that it was there is like, hey, they really do care about being on GitHub. The founders were the ones who worked on the Fair Code movement, so clearly they care about it. So.
Yeah, which is, developers trust that a lot. That is earning that kind of trust. And it does make it, I think, open source and sharing what you're doing, sharing how you're working is very important for dev tools in particular.
Yeah, and a lot of these tools tend to start open source, which, during the SaaS boom, didn't seem to be the case, but a lot of the tools coming out now, they tend to have an open source version that they're using as a growth mechanism. So that's something we've just noticed.
Yeah, very cool, though. Love it.
Alrighty, thanks everyone. Talk to y'all soon.
Thank you.